Everybody, my name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review, and today we're looking at the Ipose 5303. This is a fantastic looking watch, one of my favorite dressier style dive watches that's out there, and certainly Serica is responsible for this design. Get it? 100%. This is an homage. Ipose is an homage of that watch. But anyway, this watch is fantastic. I really, really love the design. And like I said, it's an homage, so Serica gets credit for the originality of it. But this is definitely a good pick up from there and go with it. So we're going to talk about the 5 things that we typically talk about, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and loom. When we get down to the conclusions, I'm going to talk a little bit about an issue that I had with this watch. It was a major issue with this watch because this is actually the second one. Okay, I had to send the first one back, and we'll talk more about that towards the end. The size of this watch is a 39mm case, 12.2mm thick, and 20mm between the lugs. So strap changes, very easy to do. Although I'm not going to do it because I love the stepped end link kind of but the stepped end link design to this from the mesh strap into the case. I think it's fantastic. I don't think I'll ever take out the mesh on this one because it just has that whole piece together. That makes this watch with that mesh bracelet, in my mind anyway. So as far as size goes, it's a kind of a typical dive watch weight for this particular size of a 39mm with a 12.2 height. You have a sapphire crystal, you've got a good sized crown. Everything about this watch is really good. I love the proportions of it. This to me is still within that good proportion range when you have a 39mm and a 12.2mm height. I think you don't have that chunky dive watch feel necessarily with this watch at all, which also means this watch will tend to stay in that dressy dive watch category much longer because of that proportional ratio is just so good. So size of the watch I think is great. It's not going to be anything that's going to be super heavy on the wrist. The mesh bracelet kind of lightens the load a little bit on there. And when you get to fitment, which we're going to talk about right now, the mesh bracelet, I think you can get a really good fitment with this. It's a little frustrating, honestly, to get the good fit with the mesh bracelet because you practically have to have the watch draped over your wrist, then hold on to the 2 ends of the strap, turn the watch that's on your wrist upside down onto your leg or something, and then manipulate the mesh bracelet into the clasp and get it as tight as you can with one hand because you're not going to be able to use the second hand because you can't really turn your hand around like this and hold on to things. So you're going to manipulate those 2 things together, and then you're going to put the clasp down. Okay, it works. It's fine. You'll be all right. You'll live. And actually, I found I can get a fairly tight fit with that with this mesh bracelet, so not a really big issue. I want to try and show you something, but on the mesh bracelet itself, you'll see that there are these indentations on the mesh bracelet, and that is what the clasp. There's a round portion in the clasp that puts pressure on the clasp into that little recessed area on the mesh bracelet, and that is where the connection point between the two happens so that the mesh bracelet doesn't slip through that clasp. And I think it's a pretty good system. Now, I don't think it's a system that's very robust. I would not wear this with any kind of manual labor, relatively speaking, impact type work, like hammering, chainsaws, gas-powered tools. For me, I'm going to speak from the lawn and landscape side, doing shrub work, maybe remodeling, those kind of things. I just think it's not fair to the clasp. This whole system is just not designed for that kind of stuff. This is more on that office side of work. So we'll talk more about that at the end when it comes down to conclusions. But as far as fitment goes, great fitting watch, extremely comfortable mesh bracelet. I've always thought mesh bracelets were hair pullers. This one is definitely not. This one it's outstanding. Great flexibility to it. Very, very nice watch to wear. So let's talk about finish. This watch is outstanding as far as finish goes. You have the mesh bracelet, which is kind of that semi-flashy type bracelet, which is always going to reflect a little bit of light. Then you've got this two-part system that connects the mesh to the case. I love it. It's brushed finish, which is fine, but it just adds some texture in that transition between a very small mesh texture, metal mesh texture, into these couple of longer bars, and then into this large metal case, large relatively speaking, but into the metal case of the watch itself. So I love that transition when it comes down to the finish. You do have polishing on the top edge of the lug, but it widens out to cover the entire top edge of the lug where it connects to the mesh bracelet. So I love the fact that as it moves further away from the watch, there's more polish that's visible, a little bit more flash to this watch. Lends itself to being a more formal watch as well. You have brush on the side case of the watch on both sides. The crown is a great crown. It has a signed crown on there. I love the design of it where the texture of the crown is away from the watch case a little bit, so it's easier for your fingers to get in there and grab the crown where there is texture. The texture on the bezel is awesome. It's a coin edge texture. And this bezel is really, really, really good. I like it a lot. Let's go to the dial. Black dial, you have this really wide, very distinct hour hand that is short, but it's short enough to where it actually reaches over and is in contact with the very outside edge of the hour indices. So it's a great little setup. The minute hand, and by the way, both the hour hand, minute hand, second hand are white out hands with lume on them. So completely white on a black background, which makes the legibility off the charts great. Okay, the minute hand has this kind of long, slender sword design to it, and just great. I mean, it reaches out, touches the minute track. Awesome. The second hand has a lollipop on it with a lume circle on there, which is also incredible. So the finish of this, it's a matte black finish on the dial. You've got the date window, which is white numbers on a black background. The whole thing looks great. So as far as the finish goes, this watch I think does a great job of not only doing the dive watch thing, but it gets into that dressier, more formal side of the dive watch thing. Accuracy. So this, I'm going to talk about the issue right now. So when you purchase this watch, you have three options. You have the PT5000, you have the SW200, the Sellita SW200, or the ETA 2824. And by the way, the PT5000 and the SW200 are clones of the ETA 2824. All three of them are high beat movements, 28K movement. The PT5000, I have not heard hardly any complaints about the PT5000 yet. That doesn't mean statistically that my comment is important. I'm just saying from my perspective, it sounds like it's an okay movement, and I actually just purchased my first dive watch with a PT5000 in it. So wait and see what that turns into. Accuracy-wise, well within spec, great. However, the first watch, this is the second one, I've had to return one. The first watch had a complete movement failure. I was doing this review and I was looking down and the watch wasn't running. So I figured it just ran out of juice, right? So I'm going to wind up. So I open the crown up and I start winding. I'm still talking to the camera while I'm doing this, winding. Look down. It's not moving. Like, man, I've just put at least 20 winds into this watch. It's not moving. So I pull the knob all the way out. I stop talking, pull the knob all the way out, and I try to adjust the time. Time doesn't adjust. Okay, so I'm like, ooh, this is a serious problem. So I could not get the watch to start. I couldn't adjust the time. Major issue with the movement. And what reminded me at this moment was when I first got the watch out of the box, there was some kind of hiccup between setting the time and the second hand. There was something weird going on. And at the time it ran fine. So I didn't think anything of it. I was like, well, it runs fine. It might be just a hiccup in this system. But I think that hiccup turned into a massive, catastrophic failure for that particular movement. So our SW200 movements, trash? No, it's a sample of one. And it's the experience that I had. And I tell you what, AliExpress, they refunded my money. And actually, I was able to buy this on sale at a cheaper price. So in the end, I came out, I think, $10 ahead overall. But keep in mind that the SW200 is not impervious to problems. And I know the PT5000 is a Chinese, version of the 2824. They're not impervious to problems either. But let's keep statistics where they belong, and that is if you have a sample of one, that is not something that you can generalize to the rest of those movements. So I bought another one. I'm willing to give it a shot and give it a try, and it's so far so good. Everything is working great, and I have no issues with setting the time and the second hand and the hour and minute hands doing funky stuff. None of that has happened on this watch, so I think I'm probably in the clear at this point. So accuracy-wise, totally fine. What about legibility and lume? Legibility is incredible. You can see that on the dial dial itself, you're not going to run into any issues, in my opinion, with legibility. Everything on here is awesome. I like the black dial version more than the white dial because I think it's more legible. I think the contrast is higher. So I think that's the way to go. When it comes down to loom, take a look at the loom on this watch. Incredible. And look at a round dial turns into square loomed arrangements. And I just think that is a cool visual effect that Serica put together that Ipose has homaged onto this watch. I think it's just a great effect overall. And the loom lasts all night. This is great loom. This is some of the top tier loom in all the dive watches I have. It's probably in the top 5 when it comes down to it. I think it's nipping at the heels of the Wise Adamascus 88. Is it better than that? No, it's not. It doesn't have quite the strength. But I love the design of the loom. I think the loom design of the dial, it's fantastic. This goes right up there with other dials that are out there that are just kind of unique in how they put it all together. All right, so what about the uses of this watch? This is definitely not a work watch, and primarily because with this configuration, with this bracelet, it is definitely not a work watch because of this clasp setup and just there's no safety clasp. You're dealing with, the compression of the clasp on these indentations on the bracelet, which works, but I just don't think they're robust enough to deal with kind of that manual labor type thing. So if you do any kind of manual labor, I don't think this is the way to go. Plus, it really doesn't look like a manual labor type watch. I mean, really, this is more of your professional office, semi-formal, formal style watch. Is it an everyday wear watch? Maybe. I just think the clasp is suspect to the everyday use and abuse that an everyday watch would experience. Okay, so that's where I would kind of draw the line. I'm not going to wear this every day, but I'm definitely going to wear it around the house where I'm just kind of reading books, writing articles, that kind of thing, doing these videos. I think it's a great watch in that sense for those purposes. Okay, what are the positives? Design, function, great movement. Even though I had one fail, it's still a great movement. I've not changed my opinion on that. Great movement, great design, extremely legible. I love the bezel, the mesh bracelet design, the connecting that you get from the mesh, the transition from the mesh to the case is outstanding. I love that design feature. What are the cons to this? It's the clasp. I'm just not a fan of this clasp. It takes a while to get used to. So that's the only ding I have on this watch. 9.8 out of 10. Fantastic watch. I highly recommend it. Let me know what you think if you have this, especially if you have the PT5000. I'm on a PT5000 mission. I want to find out who has PT5000 movements out there and how robust are those movements in the watches that you have. This is a great watch. Look for it on AliExpress. Wait for the sale. Get the Sellita because I think this is one of the best deals on a dive watch where you can get a Sellita movement really cheap. Cheaper than most other dive watches with a Sellita movement. So give it a shot. Let me know what you think down below. And I'd love to hear from you on that. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time.